Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. On this week's episode, I interviewed Adam O. You know him as Denver Bitcoin, but he's with Upstream Data. And Adam was on the show last summer, I believe. That was our first conversation, but he's been a good friend of the show, met up with him in Miami and all that, and was happy to have him back on. Because the you guys know I'm getting into the mining and it's just fascinating, and you kind of keep digging deeper and deeper, and it's just a whole new rabbit hole that I recommend. If you guys can afford to get yourself a miner, it's probably a good idea to start learning. But yeah, we talk about everything. We talk about, mining, is Bitcoin mining setting the floor of the price, sets the floor for the price. What is the best infrastructure for setting up a commercial mining situation, if you're looking to do something on like the bigger business level. And then we talked about some tips for home mining, and just kind of like the technical aspect of like how much air you're going to be moving. Um, and it kind of blows me away with how much air like I'd mentioned in the podcast, but like I have like the door of one of the rooms leading to the room where the miner is, like, well, like if you like unlatch it, like sucks open. Um so it's quite intimidating, but yeah, I was glad to have Adam on, and we had a great conversation and really digging down into the depths of what's going on in mining. Where are these companies going to go, now that we're opened up to the oil and gas industry, knowing that there's this opportunity to mine on their flared or wasted energy. So yeah, it was a pretty cool conversation. Hope you guys enjoy it. Thanks as always to the Bitbox O2 hardware wallet for sponsoring the show. You can get a Bitbox O2 hardware wallet at shiftcrypto.ch/Bitcoin made simple. Grab yourself the Bitcoin only hardware wallet, and it's got beautiful firmware. It's got a beautiful design, simple, easy to use. Strongly recommend it. You get 5% off with Bitcoin made simple. And also go to mymoviesplus.com. You can check out all kinds of documentaries about Bitcoin, but we have tons of other stuff like, I mean, different like World War II stuff and you know current event stuff. I mean, it's pretty eclectic, and we're adding a bunch. And I well, let me see. When's this episode? I think by the time this episode is released, we'll have announced our originals, and it's going to be popping off. So you guys will definitely want to check those out. So go to mymoviesplus.com and use the promo code Cory, Cory, and you get 20% off your subscription to Movies Plus, or you can just look in the App Store for Movies Plus. You'll find it that way. Enter the promo code, yada yada, get the 20% off. And really, for the 20% off, I think it's like $23.99 for a year. So you're looking at $2 a month. And we're delivering you ad-free content. A lot of the content, like there's original content that's coming, there's exclusive content, but then there's also stuff that you might have to get at a different subscription, or maybe some of the movies that you would find on like Tubi and other places that would, frankly, you'd have to sit through like 15 to 20 minutes worth of ads. Uh, Instead, for $2, you can watch it for free. So, or watch it ad free. So, anyways, yeah, check it out at mymoviesplus.com. Also, Upstream Data, go to upstreamdata.ca. You can see their slew of products, which includes the black box, not the Bitbox, the black box. All the sponsors are going to be some kind of box, I guess. Um, yeah, the black box. You can, if you're a miner and you're already mining and you want to muffle the sound and maybe keep those ASICs running outside, then I strongly recommend a black box. It'll dampen, and we talk about it, how much it dampens the noise, but also it's weatherproof. And you hear Adam talk about how it's handling the elements. So get yourself one there, or you can even buy a miner from Upstream Data. So go to upstreamdata.ca. And if you guys want to reach out to me, the email for the show is bitcoinmadesimplepodcast@gmail.com. Thanks. So normally sports ball, that term gets thrown around a lot. And in
What's going?
Bitcoin, we get sidetracked. I think it's good to keep sports, a healthy amount of sports in our life, because then I don't know, you get too wrapped up in Bitcoin Twitter. Um, But so usually I don't have a ton of sports questions, but you are in Denver and the
Mhm.
Colorado Avalanche won the Stanley Cup. So congratulations. And was that did you get to follow that closely, and was that a good reprieve from the rest of the world?
Yeah, it was kind of nice. I watched the Avs closely, certainly once they were in the playoffs. Hockey's one of those sports that seemingly hasn't been too tainted by politics and money,
Yep.
which is great. And I think it's kind of a testament to just the culture around hockey. Um, it's a game of grit, and it's not about being a superstar. It's about
It's not
winning,
about the
right?
money and
It's about
wearing
competing.
jewelry.
It's about being the best. And that's what I love watching. Like I love watching college basketball, like March Madness,
Oh yeah.
because I mean, like those kids they're not getting paid, even though some have been getting
Yeah.
paid. But like if you watch it, like they're not half-assing it ever. Like you watch the NBA, I mean, it's a joke, man. It's literally like you're watching people go to their job.
Yeah.
Like until the playoffs. Like, I mean, it's so crazy. Like you watch the NBA during the regular season, the scores are like 130 to 115, and then you get to the playoffs and it's like 74 to 69. It's because they actually start playing defense. They actually start playing basketball. Because they actually start trying to, want to win because they have bonuses on the line if they win the championship and the conference championship.
Exactly.
And so like I don't, I love competition. I love watching and I love participating in, trying to be better than somebody else, right? Trying to best someone and have them try to best you. I think that is a lot of the ways in which value is created, right? Is by people pushing themselves. But we've kind of lost a lot of that. So I'm with you though. Like at least the Stanley Cup. I mean, the Avs were. The cool thing was the Avalanche weren't. They certainly didn't have the best players on their team.
It's such a good team though. Like,
But God, they
combined.
were Yeah, they played together so well. Like after I watched them after that, who were they playing in the first series? After watching that first series, it was like, I don't know who can beat these guys, right? And they, obviously the Lightning were favored greatly to win from the beginning, and then once it got to the finals, they were less favored. But it was cool to watch the Avalanche win, and then it's cool just because kind of the city wakes up a little bit. They did a parade downtown.
Yeah,
it's a nice escape. I mean, that being said, like the whole world is crazy these days. It's a mess, man. It's hard to escape.
I know you can't go anywhere without seeing somebody wearing a badge that says I support the current thing, or
right.
It's just like and but yeah, it's funny. The Avs, they were good, and I didn't know how good Nathan McKinnon was. Like I'll admit this is East Coast bias. I have the Penguins, so I have Sid. So like, I know McKinnon because they're like best buds, but like I just didn't ever really watch him. And then I started watching it. I was like, oh my God, he's legit. He's the real deal.
What's crazy is that there's a lot of NHL guys, and I'm not sure. I think McKinnon might be one of them that are from Lloydminster, the town where Upstream Data, where we produce and where we operate.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Lloydminster's got something like 10 NHL players came out of this small town in Canada.
So Steve Barber is just farming an NHL team. That's what he should do.
I mean, that's what he should. I mean, we definitely we talked about it as a team before of like going and sponsoring like the local hockey rink and stuff and getting Upstream Data, on the boards and stuff like that. But a guy on our team, a guy named Taylor, I think it's either his good friend is like good friends with a couple of the NHL guys, and like it's kind of crazy just to think about them coming from these small towns in the middle of nowhere.
Oh yeah. I remember the last time the Penguins won the cup. There was a guy on the team that was like from somewhere like borderline like Eskimo country up in Canada, and like he took the cup up for his day with the cup, and he like had like a parade through town, and it was just like there's like 50 people there, and like
it's I mean it's cool because it's like it humanizes them to some degree, right?
Yeah. But Canada is interesting. So you guys, a little bit about Upstream. So I wanted to ask, it sounds like you guys are kind of expanding your operations in the US. Is that right? Or I know it's a Canadian-based company, but what's going on there? And you're not just Bitcoin mining, right? You guys do oil and gas. Like,
yeah, I always tell people we're not a Bitcoin company. right? We're an oil and gas company that is focused on Bitcoin. Our main product is building Bitcoin mines. I'd say that that's over 50%, over 65% of our business, right? Is hash huts and hash generators, hash combos. But we also provide just engines for the oil field, right? Because not even to mine Bitcoin, right? Engines to run, rotary pumps or heater treaters, separators, whatever, on-site equipment. And then
all that stuff that's ruining the earth. Yeah.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. And then we also build oil field enclosures, right? Like, if you have an engine in the oil field, you need to put it inside some type of a structure, some type of an enclosure so that it's not exposed to the elements, the weather. And so we build enclosures that have nothing to do with Bitcoin also. But primarily, yeah, we build Bitcoin mines. And then, in terms of expansion, like, I'd say about 50%, maybe a little bit over half of our business is in the US. Okay. We still do a lot of business in Canada, obviously, but I think our plan going forward is to have US operations, to actually manufacturing and fabricating in the US. And so that way, we can have US made in the USA Bitcoin mines, which I know a lot of our customers would prefer, right? And so really just a matter of entering that market. What's great about the Canadian market is that it's massive still, and we have far fewer competitors in Canada.
Oh, nice.
Whereas in the US, like, last year, specifically, like, everybody and their mother became a container company, and they're all fabricating, retrofitting, shipping containers, and things. And so, I think we have an advantage in terms of our costs, right? What it costs us to build Bitcoin mines is far better than a lot of the other guys out there. I mean, I was hearing last year that guys were paying like $250 per kilowatt for the Bitcoin mine, which is what, $250,000 for a megawatt.
Yeah.
And we have 900 kilowatt buildings that are, I think they're like $110,000. So like, we're probably closer to $125 per kilowatt, $130 a kilowatt. And that's just a testament to our fabrication method and the fact that we fabricate from scratch, right? We're not retrofitting containers and having a whole bunch of expensive welding and extra labor that goes into it, unnecessary labor, right? And so, I think we're in a good place. I mean, it's a bear market. Definitely demand is down from last year, no doubt. But we're a lean company with good leadership, and we've got a great product, right? We've been around for a while, and this is a game that's like ever changing, right? Where, I mean, even speaking to now, where these newer generation ASICs move more air than anybody ever anticipated, than anybody ever built for. And what I mean by that is the exhaust fans on the buildings, on these portable Bitcoin mines that people are building, the exhaust fans aren't powerful enough to move enough air to keep up with these ASICs, right? Well, they keep up with S9s just fine, and even at a greater density. But these newer generation ASICs, like the WhatsMiners, I mean, I think they're moving 500 CFM when they're at their high RPM, right? Because they can get up to like 7,200, 7,300 RPM on the WhatsMiners. So they're moving probably 500 cubic feet per minute. And if you have 24 ASICs per exhaust fan, well, that's like 12,000 CFM. Well, those fans are typically only rated for like 8,000 or 9,000 CFM. And so if you have a fan that's only moving 9,000 cubic feet per minute and you have a bunch of machines that are moving 12,000 cubic feet per minute, well, that fan's effectively a wall. It would be better if you actually just took that fan and removed it and just had a hole in the building. It would be better, right? It would actually,
you would get more air moving.
You would have better airflow, right? Because you're limited. You have a ceiling on what this fan can move, and that's 8,000 or 9,000 CFM. And so what we've done, and due to this fact, is we've actually upgraded our hash huts, and Steve redesigned them a little bit, tweaked the design to where now we have the optionality. We actually are offering passive cooling hash huts. So hash huts without fans, right? Where they literally don't have any fans on. It's a lot like the black box, right? That we built for home mining for the backyard, where it doesn't have any fans on it. Well, that was part of the data that we gathered, right? We've got 200 plus black boxes that we've shipped out to customers, and we've got a Telegram group where we're all sharing ideas. And people are coming to us with their issues or their questions or whatever, and it's really great. I mean, the value in this Telegram group is incredible.
Oh, I'm sure.
it's like you can't find the information anywhere else on the internet, right?
Yeah.
Like this is real experience. And so from that, what we've learned is that these newer generation ASICs can run in hot ambient temperatures so long as they have good airflow, so long as they're not being choked, right, by a filter or something. And so like the WhatsMiner, we've got a customer that's running 2 WhatsMiners in low mode in his black box, and he's got his black box like in a shed, and the shed's like closed. It's not, doesn't have airflow. It's not ventilated. Yeah. And so it's just closed. He tells us it's like 115 degrees in that shed, and the ASICs are running just fine. Now, I mean, they're hot, and they're at high and they're loud, they're screaming, but they're not overheating and they're still hashing, right? And so like from what that tells us is that there's likely a lot of locations where, so long as you have a good pressure barrier, right? So long as you have a really appropriate divider between the ASIC's exhaust and the ASIC's intake, right? Which, so long as you can separate that exhaust from the intake and none of it's going to backflow in, these ASICs can run in hot ambient temperatures, right? Up to 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and even maybe a little bit beyond that. And so from that, what it tells us is that there's a lot of places, certainly in the oil field, where fans might only be needed on the building to supplement for maybe July.
Yeah.
And to have fans for just, maybe 10% of the time, it might even only be a couple weeks in July, like doesn't make a lot of sense. And when you have those exhaust fans moving a lot more air, well, what that's going to do is it's going to move a lot more air through the building, and you're going to move a lot more dust and a lot more debris through the building. And so if you leave it up to the ASICs, well, when the temperatures aren't so hot outside, well, the ASICs their fans will, clip down a little bit and they'll move less air. And so, passive cooling, there's benefits to having no fans on the building, right? You ought to have some great benefits. And if electronics were to fail or anything, we have a louver system, like a kind of like vents on the exhaust that fail safe. And so if the building loses power, the vents shut and they seal really great. So you could like spray the side of the building with a hose and it's not going to destroy the machines on the inside, right? It's going to be nice and sealed. And so there's some benefits to passive, but then we also are, hoping to offer the option to have some fans, but only once we are 100% confident with an exhaust fan that can move enough air that it's actually supplementing the ASICs. Because if the fan's rated for 10,000 CFM, it's useless.
Yeah.
And so Steve's been working with a couple of fan manufacturers, some domestic, some overseas, getting a fan made to spec that fits all of our desires. And so, but even so, like we've got passive buildings in the field right now that are performing great, right? Even in hot climates. And so kind of, you gotta stay nimble in this game. You gotta be willing to adapt, because, first of all, like we're subject to whatever the ASIC manufacturers do, right? If they change their form factor, like we need to adjust because that's what's going to be deployed. And so we need to be able to stay nimble and be able to, innovate and kind of change design or change direction if the market so desires it. And that's kind of what we're seeing right now is, the oil and gas industry has woken up to Bitcoin. And now it's a matter of figuring out what's the most appropriate and best way to deploy Bitcoin mining within your oil and gas operations, your upstream portfolio. And, at what scale, at what frequency, at what time horizon do we integrate this? I don't think anybody's arguing that it has a place in the oil field, which is cool, right? It's, before it was kind of the debate was whether or not this thing has a place in the oil field. Now it's more, the debate is about what is its role in the oil field, not does it have one? And I mean, that's a big change, right? That's monumental.
That's a big reframing of the debate.
Yeah.
And pushing it more like now you're playing in your court,
Right. Well, then at the same time, we're seeing the interstate competition play out, where you've got a county in Colorado, Adams County, Colorado, is just sued one of our customers for mining Bitcoin.
Really?
And not just sued them. Oh yeah, not just sued them, sued a couple of other operators as well. So those operators obviously had to move their Bitcoin mines elsewhere while this is going on. But the whole premise for the lawsuit was the fact that mining Bitcoin in the oil field is not a quote unquote defined use case. And so the county commissioner, the head of economic development for the Adams County or whoever she is. Her name's Jenny something. She came out and they actually sued the operator. I mean, meanwhile, this operator, keep in mind, took capital risk in order to mitigate their emissions, right? In order to mitigate their flare, and then they get penalized for it. I mean, it's just another example of
government doing government things.
Right. Anytime regulatory bodies get involved in the marketplace, they create deadweight loss. It's a guarantee.
I mean, I wonder that myself too, because like we moved over the winter to not quite a complete homestead. I mean, I can homestead here within, I was telling my wife, like within 10 years, I bet you we have like cows and stuff, like all that stuff. Like I was like, we're still, dipping our toes in with like chickens, but like my friend gave me an almanac of like everything you'll ever need to know about taking care of anything to homestead. And I told her, I said, watch us build like eventually a shallow natural gas well, because I own the gas underneath us. I was like, we would do that. And then the government would come in and be like, no, stop. What are you doing with the stuff that you own? How dare you?
Yeah. Oh, no. Yeah, that's what they do most of the time. I mean, it's never a matter of what is most pragmatic or what is most logical. It's a matter of what is going to feed the state the most, what is going to give the state the best position to have power over this new thing and be able to collect their penance for it. Right. I mean, and it's funny, I spoke with my former boss in the oil and gas industry. I've spoken with him a good bit about this. And obviously, I mean, he was probably the most skeptical when it comes to mining Bitcoin in the oil field when I, was sharing this idea back in 2018. He was definitely one laughing at it. And one thing that he said that I never argued with, and I've been interested to see how it plays out, is he's like, listen, the government's going to come and figure out a way to get their piece of this whole thing. Now, while that's happening in Adams County, then you go look over at Wyoming, and Wyoming, what was like early 2021, came out and said, hey, if you come to Wyoming and you mine Bitcoin on flared gas, we won't tax you on that gas. So they came out and built an incentive in for, miners or oil and gas producers to implement Bitcoin mining. So the interstate competition is going to take place. And, places like, I guess, Colorado, or at least Adams County, where they're going to be threatening toward, miners in the oil field, guys will flee. And that's exactly what we saw. They moved their Bitcoin mines to other basins. And so the tax dollars will flee with them.
Yeah.
And so, it's just a matter of the state shooting itself in the foot as always.
Yeah. Well, and that kind of speaks to the strengths of upstream, because so I don't even think I told you, but I had mentioned to Steve, I'm starting to get into the Bitcoin mining business. Like I have a miner at home, like I, obviously doing that, but on the business end, like, Bob Burnett with Barefoot Mining, he's Boomer Bitcoin on Twitter.
I don't know him.
So him and I have been talking, and he's been helping me, and we're either gonna like have some of our businesses funded or like maybe raise funds or whatever. But I got in contact with all these people around Pennsylvania and Ohio and West Virginia with that have stranded natural gas.
Yeah.
And they were like, at first I was like, oh, they'll be really hard to find them and really hard to convince them. And then like this guy I met ran a conference here in the Pittsburgh area, and had all these guys showed up, and they're like, yeah, how can I sell this gas to you? So they're selling it like, I think like the end cost, like it'll come out initially to us at like they'll make 1.5 cents per kilowatt or whatever. And then after the infrastructure and everything like that, the cost will basically be about 4 cents to the investors and the shareholders. So it's like a really good deal for mining Bitcoin. It's going to make some really good money for people. But what I was learning and setting this up, because Bob says he uses your hash hots, and he said, he was like, the biggest problem that people run into is they go and they retrofit a building, and they're like, oh, like, there's this building on site, and they pour, like $50,000 to $100,000 into retrofitting it or whatever. And then that well, I mean, it doesn't necessarily dry up right away, but something happens that makes you move. You know what I mean? Like the operator there, whoever owns the gas rights starts to become a problem. And he was like, the beauty of using the hash huts is that you can just pack up. You know, you get a truck in there, you pack it, you load it up, and you leave, and you have all your facilities with you. So, that kind of, I just wanted to highlight that point of what you were saying, where you're maximizing the airflow. But like, are you seeing that where people are starting on the business side, if they're doing a larger scale operation, they're like, no longer retrofitting buildings, it's going with things like hash huts, and that's what you're talking about, right? When
Yeah.
you
We see it in a couple different ways. I mean, like one thing, and by the way, did you say Bob Burnett, is it barefoot mining?
yeah.
Okay, yeah, no, I'm aware of barefoot mining. Sorry, I thought it was like either cut out or something. I heard you say like bear drum mining, and I was like, what is? I'm
bear drum
not
mining
familiar.
That'll
Yeah,
be
I was
the
like,
new
what?
name for it.
Yeah, barefoot mine. No, yeah. So, I mean, this is what's interesting is this, right? A lot of guys think that building the physical infrastructure for mining Bitcoin is like the easy part.
Mm-hmm.
And with these newer generation ASICs, they're definitely wrong, because there's some serious challenges, right?
Mm-hmm.
What I will say though is there's more than just guys coming from hey, we don't want to vertically integrate and build our own things because it's just too big of a pain in the butt. And then they look at our prices and they're like, it's probably going to cost us more anyway. We might as well just buy hash huts from you.
Yeah.
But beyond that, we've actually got some people coming to us from the immersion side of things, right? So there's been some that have tried immersion in the oil field and didn't have a good time. Now that may not be a testament to immersion being a failure in general. I think it's more maybe a testament to the companies that were involved in this. And it sounds to me like, the company that purchased an immersion system felt like they didn't get treated very well. Like when they had problems, the people that made it didn't help out and they didn't take responsibility and things. And so they're actually going to air cooled, right? Now, obviously they can't move those ASICs because they've already immersed them, right? And you can't take an ASIC and bring it back to air cooled, but they're looking at air cooled now because immersion was it was like 4 times the cost on the building. Like they were spending like $400 per kilowatt, 400 grand per megawatt. And so they're going to save some money on that side, but just a matter of, again, trending toward pragmatism, right? Like that's the thing about the oil field is, I've said this so many times to guys on the phone is, when you go fancy in the oil field, you go broke in the oil field, right? Like that's what happens. I mean, mining Bitcoin in the oil field is not about being fancy and high tech and, extra or whatever, right? It's about finding that path of least resistance, finding about what's most pragmatic, and
efficiency.
Efficiently, ultimately building another piece of on-site oil field equipment that's going to be relatively, manageable and maintainable by the people that are already existing in the organization. And so, like we do a really good job at that. Not to mention we have a team of really intelligent oil and gas professionals, right? Whether it's mechanical engineers, petroleum engineers. We've got a team of guys that can really help with engine questions, guys that have engine issues. Engine issues are like the number one thing in the oil field. I mean, it was something I was going to ask you about, your plan with going out to, Pennsylvania, Louisiana, probably out there in the Marcellus, is, I see a lot of these joint ventures out in the oil field. And one thing that always, one way that they get structured that I think is inferior to another way is it's kind of a joint venture where like the Bitcoin miner comes in, and oftentimes a Bitcoin miner will buy all the infrastructure, the engine, the Bitcoin mine, the miners. And then they're effectively just doing like a PPA where they're buying gas from the operator.
Yeah.
And the issue I see there mainly is the engine, right? Because if the oil and gas producer who operates that well, who's going to be on site and dealing with it and pumping the well, if they don't own the engine, it's typically a recipe for disaster, because when you have an engine issue, they're not going to be very incentivized to fix it. Right. And it's not, it's like to them, they don't give a shit. Right. Yeah. It's not their infrastructure, it's broken or whatever. You're going to be freaking out because your Bitcoin mine is going to be down.
Yeah.
They're not going to be caring all that much. Now they're not selling gas, so you're not going to be paying them for gas. So they're a little bit incentivized, but they're not nearly as incentivized as if they owned that engine. So I always think it's a smart way to I guess, arrange those joint ventures where the oil and gas producer they have to take some risk alongside the miner. Otherwise, I think there's an imbalance
There's
in
an imbalance
that
in
part.
risk
Yeah.
reward and incentive.
Well, yeah, but then if they take some risk, then you can have a true profit share, right? You can truly say, hey, you're going to buy the engine, which is 40% of the total capital. We're going to buy the Bitcoin miners and the hut, which is maybe 60% of the capital. So let's do this. Let's have a profit share of 60-40 until we get paid back. And then we'll go 50-50. Right.
Yeah.
And then it's truly like you have free power, but you're only getting half your hash rate effectively. Right. And so the question is whether or not, I mean, this is where I stand. The reason I like that is because at the end of the day, what value are you providing to an oil and gas producer? Well, you're taking some risk that they're not willing to take. You're buying Bitcoin miners and a building that they don't want to buy. Some point in the future, they're going to be comfortable buying Bitcoin miners. But it may not be next month, it might be next year or the year after. But at some point, they're going to wake up and buying Bitcoin ASICs isn't going to be nearly as scary as it was 2 years ago or 3 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And so at that point, if they're acting in their own best interest, which I imagine they will, they're just going to kick you off the well.
Yeah.
Right? Because the only reason you're willing to pay 4 cents or whatever is because you're making 10 or 12.
Yeah.
And so they're going to know that, right? And they're going to say, okay, well, how much could this shit cost us? And then they're just going to buy this stuff themselves and mine on there. And that's where it should gravitate to anyway, because that makes the most sense, right? And so now if you get into a partnership where there's a rev split, like there's many oil and gas producers, I think that'll do a revenue, like a joint venture for the next decade.
Yeah.
Right? They won't buy ASICs so long as they find a good partner that they, feel they can trust and things have been going well. And so I always just try to think about those things in the long term. How are they going to act once they're no longer afraid of buying this stuff?
Yeah, that's true. I didn't think about
worth
that.
Considering.
And just for clarity, so when you say the engine, you mean like the generator?
Yeah, the gen set.
Yeah. Because I forget, I think the one site we were looking at, like the generator itself is going to be like $500,000.
Then it had to be about a megawatt.
Yeah.
I would say.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so it, it's a big part of it. The question then becomes
50%.
Yeah. Like, do we end up in that scenario? So you're saying it's better to have the operator or them buy it, so it's a true, like, basically split, and that's their equity into the partnership. Because one thing I think I was initially thinking of with owning the generator was like, hey, if this relationship goes south, along with the hash hut, we can move the generator too, and like take it to a new location, and we already have it. And
that's something to consider. I wouldn't say it's, there's a little bit of an advantage there. But the reason that I say the engine or the gen set, right, for the oil and gas producers, because that's not foreign to them.
Yeah, they buy that.
Right? They buy that shit all the time, right? They've been doing that since before Bitcoin. And so having them invest in an engine isn't foreign to them. And even if Bitcoin goes to zero, that engine isn't worth zero. And so their risk is pretty minimal in that regard. And that's why I'd say that it's important
kind of more advantageous for both sides.
I think, and because it's their asset, now they're going to be really incentivized to maintain that engine well, like make sure that it gets its oil changes on time and make sure that, the engine is humming and not, it's properly timed, and they'll get a good mechanic out there that knows what he's doing. Whereas if it's your engine, they might not be as, inclined to.
It'll be me driving out there to make sure that it's
exactly. And you don't want that. And so ultimately it's just a matter of trying to, again, back to one of the first principles of Bitcoin that's so beautiful, right, is, this is a system, certainly the mining side of Bitcoin, that is so well designed with counterbalancing mechanisms that anytime one aspect of Bitcoin gets overloaded, there's a counterbalancing force to bring us back to equilibrium, right? Anytime a country kicks out a bunch of hash rate, well, like, everyone else is way more incentivized to bring hash rate online, and the reward is even greater. And the same thing goes, is true for the other way. When hash rate goes out of control, like, it's no longer that lucrative to mine, and many people are incentivized to place capital elsewhere. And so I think it's so crazy because these are the early days, right? This is the first million blocks, even the first 1.5 million blocks of Bitcoin mining is the exciting time in Bitcoin mining. After, 1.5 million blocks, or whatever, it's going to get kind of boring, right? Like the risk is going to go down, the reward's going to go down. It's going to become a lot more predictable, I'd say. These are the times where everyone's going to look back. I mean, people will look in 2055 and they will just lay in bed at night and be so pissed that they weren't alive and active during the beginning of Bitcoin mining, because there was so much opportunity here, not just for asymmetric knowledge, but for actual financial gain.
You're gonna want to get a BitBox02 hardware wallet for many reasons. Exchanges are falling apart. The sky is falling outside. I mean, everything is going down. It's a kind of a crazy time in this world. And the last thing you need to do is leave your keys on an exchange because everything else is crazy and unpredictable. But if you put your keys onto a BitBox02 hardware wallet, you'll know where your Bitcoin is. It'll be your path to self-sovereignty and be able to take your wealth into your hands and control it. So please do that. Get yourself a BitBox02 hardware wallet at shiftcrypto.ch/Bitcoin made simple. Use the promo code Bitcoin made simple to get 5% off and grab yourself the Bitcoin only one. And you can check it out. It's sleek. It is a great design. It is the size of a thumb drive and it's easy, simple to use. And if I can figure it out in it took me like less than 5 minutes to set it up and everything, then anyone can. And it comes with an SD card to, create your own backup. And the firmware is open source. So, it has been poked through and made sure everything's good. So get yourself a BitBox02 hardware wallet. Go to shiftcrypto.ch/Bitcoin made simple and use promo code Bitcoin made simple to get 5% off. Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, that's why I'm jumping in because I think, like, to your point of where people are going to move towards their best interest, and it's kind of with that equilibrium of Bitcoin and how Bitcoin is constantly putting you in ownership and responsibility for everything. Like there is no passive way to make income. Like the moment you start passively like doing it, like being a rent seeker, basically, like where if you're going to if you're like, oh, I just want to invest like 100 grand in a company that's going to mine Bitcoin on this, natural gas facility or whatever, that's good for now. But in a decade, it will have shifted to you need to be in control of your own destiny. And, it's kind of like back in, 10 years ago or, 12 years ago when people were mining on their home computers. And it was like, oh, look at this. Like, like basically you were like a rent seeker. I mean, you were doing the work, but like your computer you're getting money for nothing. And eventually that, like, it just seems like with Bitcoin mining, it's like you get to a point where you're like, okay, I'm getting money for nothing, but then you have to ramp it up and keep going to the point where you're just going to own it yourself and you're going to be a self-sufficient.
It was seemingly nothing, right? It was seemingly nothing. It was because it was such small amounts of electricity that it was seemingly nothing. And it's kind of an interesting point that in order for Bitcoin to work, in order for Bitcoin to even be a thing, Satoshi Nakamoto had to kind of breathe life into the network, right? He had to mine the first block at a loss.
Yeah.
Right. He actually had to spend electricity mining it. Now, not very much, because the difficulty was like 0, but he had to spend electricity mining it, and it wasn't worth anything. It was truly worth 0, right? And so there was cost without any monetary reward there, at least with any, it wasn't very liquid. If it had no liquidity. And so, that's after that, everything else, every other Bitcoin has cost behind it, right? And it's an important point, right? The whole thesis, at least in my mind, behind why Bitcoin can be a multi-million-dollar price per coin, right? Why I think cent parity isn't that far off, right? Which is $1 million Bitcoin price, is because the market value, the daily market value for the amount of energy that's stranded or wasted in the world is huge. It's trillions of dollars. And so Bitcoin rescues that energy. And it's ultimately it's a market for it. Now, right now, if we were to take all stranded and wasted energy on Earth and use it to mine Bitcoin, nobody would mine Bitcoin because the rewards would be so shit, right? It would be
Yep.
so diluted, it'd be so overly competitive that nobody would be making anything. So in order for even a small percentage of global waste energy, global stranded energy to be used for mining Bitcoin, we're going to need to see a million, $2 million+ Bitcoin price. So
Yeah.
I think it's one of the justifications for it, right? It's, what value does Bitcoin provide to give it a multi-trillion dollar market cap? It rescues trillions of dollars of stranded energy and
Yeah.
provides a downstream market for that. I mean, beyond, without even talking about
The monetary side.
the monetary benefit, right? What is the value of somebody being able to flee with all of their wealth in their mind in an, inconfiscatable way? It's pretty valuable in my opinion. So, I guess the energy side of it's just a little bit more measurable.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's maybe where I tend to lean. And in fact, like we won't see a big percentage of oil field natural gas or wasted energy get used to mine Bitcoin unless Bitcoin gets at least above $500,000, right? I mean, right now,
Oh,
if
yeah.
the whole oil field jumped into mining Bitcoin, like there's only $20 million per day of rewards
Yeah.
to miners. I mean, $20 million a day, that's a joke to the oil and gas companies. I mean, these oil and gas companies they sell 1 million barrels of oil per day at
Yeah.
$100 per barrel, right? That's $100 million a day. They don't give a shit. I mean, if the whole Bitcoin mining market is $20 million a day, it's peanuts right now, right? We need to see a 10x of that. If it's all of a sudden it's $200 million a day, well, now we're waking up, right? Or $1 billion a day. Well, now we only need 2% of that for it to be a $20 million a day market for us. And so we're early. It seems like it's late, but it's so early.
It's ridiculously early. And I just see that. Okay, it kind of plays into the theory. I was wondering, because it's funny. I tell people, if you're thinking about getting into Bitcoin mining, buy what you can afford and just like dip your toes in slowly, similar to like what I did with getting into Bitcoin in general. But it changes your perspective on everything. And so, like mining, I think when I started mining, it was in like the 40s, and now it's down at 23 or whatever. I don't know. I just see this, like I used to think that Bitcoin miners would be hodling at the top and selling at the bottom. I don't know why I thought that, just like a smooth brain thought. And then now I think about it, I'm like, does this really set the floor for the price? Because the people that are really committed, and like me, just on like an individual scale, I was like, I'm not selling any of the Bitcoin I'm mining. Like I'm just paying for the energy. And it's slightly profitable at the moment. But I look at it as like my DCA with like a discount. Uh but like on a minor scale, like I feel like this should set the floor for them, because if they're really committed to it, unless like they're the ones that are poorly managed and they had to offload their Bitcoin, you're not going to sell your Bitcoin now. You're going to just allocate your capital towards selling off. Now, so I get the floor argument, but then I started to think, does that mean that Bitcoin miners also hamper the price as it goes up, or maybe help slow it on the hockey stick growth? Because let's just say, if you're someone that's a Bitcoin miner that's taking it on the chin right now, and kind of spending a lot of your cash reserves, when Bitcoin gets up to 40, 45, you're probably going to offload a little bit, don't you think? Just to, or a little bit more than you normally would, to replenish your cash reserves.
I mean, there's back and forth there. Like one of it is, I mean, one basic fact is that Bitcoin is highly liquid, right? It might be, it's likely of the most liquid assets in someone's portfolio. Which means, typically people turn to their liquid assets when times get tough, when they need cash. So I'd say that it's not crazy to think that some miners had to liquidate at these lower prices because, just they had to, right? It's tough times. And that is what it is, right? I will say this, I agree. I mean, there's been many discussions about Bitcoin miners setting the floor, right? And if you look at it today, I'd say that the best miners out there are mining at, they're probably mining a coin for $7,000, $8,000, $6,000, which means that they're at like 4 cents per kilowatt hour, maybe somewhere lower than that. But if they're lower than that, they probably have other costs that bring that aggregate up. And so I think that does set a floor to some degree, because Bitcoin mining is a measure. In many ways, Bitcoin mining is just demand, right? And I think it's a truer measure of demand than price, because it's long-term demand, right? It takes time to set up a Bitcoin miner. It's infrastructure, it's physical infrastructure that has considerations. And so I would say that's a greater measure of demand for Bitcoin than just somebody who wants to throw $5 at it, right? Just on a whim to get rich or whatever. And so in many ways, yeah, Bitcoin mining or difficulty or total hash rate is a measure of demand, and demand has grown significantly over the last 10 years, right? I don't think that they hamper the upward movement of Bitcoin too much. Now, I hear what you're saying, in the sense that maybe miners have a big reserve of coins, and when price goes up, they're going to sell those coins at a nice profit.
And I don't think that a lot of them will sell like, oh, we're out, just
no, of course, but a tactful, business decision to take some profit, right? But there's diminishing impact on that, because if you think about Bitcoin, that's what's so fun about Bitcoin, is that there's ultimately unlimited upward slippage potential, and the downward slippage has a lot lower potential, right? Like, in other words, what we're saying is like a crash to 6K, like is kind of, in my opinion, like if we crashed hard, fucking recession and stuff out there, like I don't even think we go much below 5,000, right? Like that would be really surprising to me. Whereas an upward movement, there's only 900 new Bitcoin per day. Yeah. So if demand is outpacing that 900 new Bitcoin, well, those miners can only have so much of an impact. Now, they do have reserves that they could then dump, but as they dump those reserves, the remaining reserves become less impactful, right? And so, because it's a smaller marginal percentage, and so that's what's kind of fun, right? Like that's the whole bull thesis behind mining Bitcoin, right? While it's natural for us to focus on, kind of the difficulties of mining, the considerations, it's important, I think, to always mention what is the bullish case. Like, why even do this if there's so much hassle to it, right? And the reason I always want to have hash rate is because I know Bitcoin price can fucking run way faster than competition can keep up, right? I know that Bitcoin could go to 100,000 in 90 days, and there's a 0% chance that the network goes from 200 exahash to, what is that? Would be a zeta hash or I think it's a zeta hash. Like, there's no way that the network competition 5x's in the same period of time. It's impossible, in fact. I mean, because of the electrical infrastructure.
It would literally
required.
Break the grid. Like,
not even break. Like, there's not
enough miners out there. It's not
enough time, right? You need time, and so in order to get electrical infrastructure, I mean, like transformers and like to get a megawatt transformer right now, could take a lot of time, depending. But keep in mind, you need 30 megawatts for a single exahash. So if you want to double the network right now, you need 6 gigawatts. So if you want to 5x it, you need 30,000 megawatts. Like, that's not going to happen in 100 days. No. It's just not going to happen, right? And so maybe 300 megawatts a day. It's not going to happen. And so that upward potential is what keeps me motivated to always have hash rate online, because you're never going to be able to time it. You're never going to be able to buy an ASIC the day before price does its thing. And you're just, so like, you got to be participating in this game. You got to try to stay lean and participate as much as you can. Have the hard, I mean, that's one of those things, like, there's a couple of things that will always keep me having an ASIC, right? And one of them is regulation, right? I think regulators, it's not a crazy bet to say that regulators are going to come in and get pretty weird about self-custody and withdrawing from exchanges, right? And so when that happens, I think an ASIC has a premium on it. Or if that happens, I guess would be a more accurate thing to say. The second thing is ultimately the upward potential of a discount, right? Where if I have ASICs that work, and even if I just am sitting on them, like not even plugging them in, there's an argument for when Bitcoin runs to have that hardware. Because if you looked at the numbers, right? Say you looked at it like last year, if you had bought an S19 or whatever, right when they came out for like $3,000 before Bitcoin had run, and you even sat on it, right? Now you'd have some opportunity cost there. You'd have the opportunity cost of like maybe 0.2 Bitcoin or something. Well, last year when hash price was up to 40 cents, like how long do you have to run that ASIC at 40-cent hash price before that purchase was justified? And then considering the value of the ASIC, right? And so like running those numbers, what I find is, I mean, it's really interesting because for me, at least, buying an ASIC, I bought ASICs at the top, right? Like I bought when Bitcoin was 55 and 60,000. And I think that was better than buying them today.
Oh yeah.
At least in terms of how they're denominated, like pricing them in Bitcoin, pricing them in their earnings, how many days of their earnings are they priced at? And I think they were priced better last year, right? When Bitcoin was at 55, 60,000, they were priced at a lower Bitcoin denomination. I bought them for like 12 million sats, right? Where today 12 million sats is like what, $2,400. You can't get an S19 for $2,400. So, but I think I paid like 7,500 or $8,000 for one. But Bitcoin was like 55 grand. And I paid like 8,500 bucks or something like that. And so it was like 13 million sats or something. And so, in that regard, what's interesting is if you say you today were to go buy an ASIC for $3,500 or $4,000, yes, there's a potential opportunity cost on the upside. Say Bitcoin, right after you buy that ASIC, Bitcoin runs up to 80 grand. Well, that ASIC's going to go up too, right? So it's not a complete opportunity cost. It's not like that ASIC is worth zero the second you buy it, where I think some people calculate it that way. And if you can go to the market, if say instead of 4xing like the price, say that ASIC just 3x, say it's worth 12 grand. Well, really then you only have a lot smaller opportunity cost, right? Where it's like, oh, well, shit, maybe I lost out on 5 million sats or something. Well, then you look back and it's like, well, but over these months we mined 7 million sats of profit. We're actually in the green, right? We end up with more Bitcoin than we started with. And so, there's a lot of variables to really consider when you want to talk about it on the small scale. But all of that, I just kind of throw to the wayside, right? All those numbers become moot when I start thinking about not being able to withdraw Bitcoin from Coinbase or Strike or Swan or whoever. Then it's like, I need to have a couple hundred terahashes because I don't want to get cut off from sovereignly being able to hold and store my wealth in Bitcoin, right? Yeah. I want a sovereign way to store my wealth in Bitcoin going forward. And the best thing I can find for that is an ASIC, right? Now, peer-to-peer, having friends that, maybe have a bunch of Bitcoin that would sell you some and stuff like that, it can be helpful. But usually when you want to buy it, nobody wants to sell.
Oh, no, exactly.
Right.
That's what I had just placed the order for my ASIC, then went to the conference, and I still don't think people are giving enough credence to what Jack Mallers announced. With the ability, I just was my eyes got so wide when he was like, I'm mining Bitcoin and it's on my node running over Tor, and I just bought a Coke with it. And I was like, oh my God, this is self-sovereign, to the nth degree, it's just,
yeah. Well, it should be that way. I mean, that's what everybody thinks about Bitcoin kind of like a stock, because that's a pretty common way to think about it, right? It's just like because everything's dollars still, right? It's I'm going to invest $1,000. Hopefully I end up with $5,000 or whatever. And that's still the measuring stick. And the measuring stick is still bastardized. It's still changing and messed up. And so there's still a lack of precision. I heard this guy I spoke with, I think he actually signed up to consult with me. But he gave me this analogy on Bitcoin, and it was beautiful. He talked about Bitcoin being, it's like it's a navigation tool. So one thing that this guy's really proficient at is sailing. He's been like a captain of like sailboats and yachts and stuff for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And he talked about how the way that we as humans measure, the way that we navigate oceans is the first thing you do is you try to figure out where you are, right?
Mm-hmm.
You use tools to figure out where am I? And then you say, okay, well, if we head it this direction at this speed for this amount of time, then we should end up here at this time. And then we should go this way, right? And like, that's how you navigate. And Bitcoin is like the tool to tell you where you're at. And it's a point of reference, if you will, for a point of economic reference to try to figure out where things have actually gone. Because if we use the dollar that's ever changing, we're never going to be, you can never figure out where the fuck you are. Yeah. Right. And then you can't figure out where you're going or where you've been. And so Bitcoin being, you know, the benefit of sound money, the real value there on a macro kind of societal scale is, you know, what happens to human productivity, what happens to that microeconomic behavior when people have a clear and accurate representation of economic conditions where they're at, like the value of lumber. Like, what the hell should lumber cost?
Yeah.
Right. Like, what does it cost to produce? Like these, they're really tough. It's really tough to determine because the dollar is so ever changing, and interest rates are so ever changing that way that you could, have 10 economists. Yeah. Have 10 economists go try to tackle that question. They'll come back with different numbers and they'll be drastically different, potentially. And so having that sound economic navigation tool, I think on a societal level will have immeasurable benefits, right?
Like a financial compass.
Exactly. Well, you become a better microeconomic actor. You make better, when individuals start making better decisions, the collective benefit is going to be really tough to measure, but it's going to be immense. Right. And so, and that brings with it, not just like all the, rainbows and good stuff. It means that like people will feel economic pain from poor economic decisions. Where in the dollar, they hardly, that's like, how do you fuck up?
They never get penalized.
Yeah, you never get penalized. Right. And that's a factor of the United States becoming this system that privatizes the gains and socializes the losses. Right.
Yeah.
And all the profits go to a few pockets and all the losses get spread amongst the taxpayers. And that's inherently flawed, right? I mean, like I harp really hard on ESG and a lot of this carbon accounting nonsense, but really that's just a side effect of the money printer, right? I mean, you can't have this ESG carbon accounting scam. I mean, truly, it's a flawed accounting system. Yeah, it's a scam. It's a racket, if you will. You can't have that unless you have the ability to create money from nothing at no cost. And so, this is the thing. There's amazing benefits to Keynesianism, right? There's amazing benefits to the money printer. And if you think about it, the benefit, I mean, it's really easy when you think about it. Like, what if I had a money printer? Right? I had a thing that I just press a button and it shoots out all this paper and people just are dying. Yeah, well, they're dying for that paper. They demand that paper. They want it. And people will accept that paper for exchange of goods and services. Well, effectively what I have is I have a machine that gets shit done, right? Because I can just press this button and I can just get 1,000 people to go put work in to get a man on the moon, right? Like I can just get shit done. What I can have, you can have companies like Amazon that borrow for the first 12 years of their existence, never make a profit, but they're able to survive because of this money printer system, right? This infinite debt system. And then all of a sudden you look and it's like, wow, 5-10 years later, I can literally go on my phone, press a button and 5,000 specific screws show up at my doorstep the next day from halfway around the world. Like we wouldn't have an Amazon next day or same day delivery if we didn't have Keynesianism in the money printer. Man, hell, we might not even have the iPhone today, right? So you can get shit done. The side effect of the Keynesianism central planning money printer scheme is that it concentrates wealth. Is that only a few get uber wealthy, right? Whereas I think the natural law of what is it called? It's like of degradation or whatever it is, right? Or law of value dissemination is like 20% of the population will probably own 80% of the wealth. Whereas today we have like 0.1 owning, 99.99% of the wealth.
Yeah.
And so I think Keynesian, Bitcoin isn't going to make a communistic world. It's not like everyone's going to have the same amount of money.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm one of those I'm a skeptic in the sense that I believe the elites of the Keynesian system have gotten so elite, I don't think they can be dethroned, right? Because all they got to do is swipe like 2%, 1% of their net worth into Bitcoin, and they'll have more Bitcoin than you or I could ever own. And so, like, what I think is what we'll find is an easing on that wealth concentration, right? It won't be such a catalyst or an exacerbation to that wealth disparity. And we'll slowly start to move back to where we see more like 10, 20% of the population owning 70, 80% of the wealth, which is, I think, more natural, right? That natural distribution. And we see it in nature, right? I mean, it's like, you see it amongst the animal kingdom even, where only a small percentage of the lions are like doing really well and have what you would consider to be wealth, like a large pride, and have females and cubs. Meanwhile, there's mainly, there's despair amongst the majority, or at least tough times amongst the majority. And that's kind of the natural law of distribution, and one that, God, we are really far away from, right? I mean, freaking, we've got guys worth like $200 billion in this world right now. I mean, that's such an insane amount of money.
Insane. And
it's immeasurable.
And, you think about, you're probably right. Like, I think that it might not happen in any of our lifetimes that balancing will take place, because, you're probably right where you think like, yeah, if all they have to do is take 1 or 2% of their wealth, throw it into Bitcoin, they're going to have more than us, and the Bitcoin price is going to run, and they're still going to remain in their throne. But it'll probably be like their grandchildren,
exactly,
where it'll start balancing. Time. It's going to take a while, because they'll buy the Bitcoin to remain in the throne. But yeah, the beauty of Bitcoin is that you only get value if you provide value.
Yeah, but I mean, how do you fuck up $1 billion though? Like, I mean, how do you even lose that? I mean, that's 1,000 million, right? I mean, like, if you can get 1% yield on that $1 billion, right? You're making 10 mil a year.
Yeah.
Like, you can literally spend 30 grand a day and you'll make money.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, that, dude. Like, I mean, it's stupid. I mean, that's what's so interesting. I mean, people don't really, we throw the words around a lot, and we don't really think about how massive $1 billion is. But that's why people talk about like Bill Gates or Bezos, if they, during the time that they were building their companies, if there was $100 bill on the ground, it wouldn't be worth their time to pick it up. Right. Because like, if you take Bezos's net worth and you divide it by the amount of seconds that he spent working at Amazon, it's like, he's making like $485 a second or something like that. And so, and then like the interest on that, like, I mean, just think about, I mean, it's so stupid. These guys, and they're in the know. So they don't get 1% yield. They get like fucking 80% yield.
Oh yeah.
And they're by the money printer. And so like, it's just that compounding aspect to, the rich getting richer. It's not a matter, I mean, the rich get richer not because of a corrupt system necessarily. In this regard, it doesn't, the corrupt system helps them get richer, but the rich get richer mainly because you have to, I mean, in order to really become wealthy, you have to risk capital, right? And the more capital you can risk, the smaller the win can be with a massive nominal return. And so, this is, the coolest thing about Bitcoin is it's a Trojan horse. It's a carrot for education, right? I saw this with one of the best examples I've shared is Kevin O'Leary, Mr. Wonderful or whatever the hell from Shark Tank. Well, I don't know if you remember when he first came out to Bitcoin, right? He was that guy that was like, hey, I just learned about Bitcoin. I'm here to fix it.
Oh yeah.
Right. He was talking about the mining green Bitcoin and how it used too much energy and things. Well, apparently Mark Moss spoke with him at Bitcoin in Miami in April. And he's completely changed his tune. He's come to this. Yeah. He's come to this realization that Bitcoin mining is actually going to like save the planet from any, energy issues. Because Bitcoin helps incentivize the most economic and efficient forms of energy, right? Which, I could go into a long diatribe on what that is, but ultimately what that tells me is that, so that's a really great example. Like, this is a guy that is very well versed, right? I mean, like, anytime that he gets introduced anywhere, it's preceded by all of his experience, right? The amount of companies he's invested in, the amount of failures he has, and still, this guy at what is he, 50 something years old, didn't know shit about energy production or electricity production. It took Bitcoin to teach him how energy is actually produced in this world. And it took time, right? It wasn't day one. He learned about Bitcoin. He got on the internet. He looked like an idiot for a while talking about green blocks and stuff. And then lo and behold, a little bit later, he actually went down some rabbit hole and started to figure out the inefficiencies and shortcomings of energy production and distribution. And he figures out that Bitcoin is this awesome tool to help energy production. It's not a hindrance. And so Bitcoin's energy consumption is it's an aspect of the blockchain. It's not a flaw. And so that can't be overstated, right? Where I think Mr. Wonderful isn't alone. I think there's tons of people out there that have no idea about Keynesian economics, Keynesian monetary policy. And Bitcoin will teach them. Bitcoin will teach them why this is flawed, why this infinite money supply is flawed, why we don't even know how many dollars are in circulation is a flawed system. And they'll learn why energy is the backbone and foundation of every other industry, right? That it's ultimately kind of what makes the world go round, right? Electricity is the fuel of the modern world. And without cheap and abundant electricity, you cannot be brought into a modern standard of living, right?
Life won't flourish if energy isn't readily available.
No, it won't. And I mean, that's the thing, is we have shitloads of energy available. We have no shortage of energy, right? We have issues with utilizing and distributing energy, but we do not have an energy supply problem.
Well, it's just, this could get into like the whole, I mean, it drives me nuts how the environmentalists don't see that the environment provides us the energy that we need. Like, if you strip down what Earth is, you'd be like, oh, it's like a nuclear power plant. Like, it, even down to the fact that, like, you could look at the Atlantic Ocean is the warm water from the nuclear power plant, and the Pacific Ocean is the cold water, and it's this like perfectly operating system. And like the nerve of human beings to think that we can change this thing that's been here for billions of years, and somehow we're going to save it. It makes me so, it is infuriating to me. And then, like, they're like, we have finite energy. It's like, oh really? Like, we'll go look at the oil wells or the oil fields that were dried up 30 years ago.
Oh, well, I mean, there's a lot of examples of that. I mean, one of the things that's so interesting to me is, I mean, I ask people oftentimes, like, let's say that all the climate change rhetoric is completely accurate, right?
Yeah.
Like all the doomsday stuff. So let's just assume that's correct. Are we then to say that we think we can fix like, first of all, do we know what perfect atmospheric composition looks like? Like, what is the atmosphere supposed to be made up of? Like, what are the percentages of different, molecules? So even if we somehow knew what the correct atmospheric composition was, how are we supposed to get to it? I mean, are we supposed to sit here and believe that 212 sovereign nations are going to be able to accomplish a atmospheric composition based upon, through regulation and taxation?
Yeah.
No fucking, I mean, they can't even count votes.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, these people can't even count ballots.
Like, they can't balance a budget.
They can't do shit. They're awful at everything they try to do. Why do we believe that giving them more money will, make the weather perfect? I mean, there's a lot of, just like that alone is just a massive logical fallacy. But the other side of it that is interesting is, I mean, humans are often not kind of categorized as being a part of the environment. Like we act as though
like
everything
we're
else,
aliens to it.
like we're alien to this rock, which is just bizarre to me. But then the worst of it all, the thing that is the most tragic, and this is where I would say it's complete propaganda, marketing, hell, brainwashing, much more than it is maybe just misplaced guidance or misplaced principles. But there's true corruption in the idea that energy consumption is like a one-to-one relationship, negative relationship with the environment. And that's what they've led people to believe, is that like for every time you turn on a light switch, like you're like deteriorating a forest or something like it. You know what I mean? It's like melting, and then like when you turn it off, it stops. Like that's the mental image. That's the concept they put in people's mind, is that, you know, we need to reduce consumption is the whole mantra. And that in my mind is that's just wrong, right? We need to reduce waste. We need to stop wasting so much. We need to become more efficient. But reducing consumption is antithetical to growth, right? Like it's antithetical to human flourishing. And so anytime I hear these regulators talk about, you know, reducing demand or reducing that consumption, I get this really like sinister message from them, right? That they want human beings to stop, like to stop becoming better, to stop progressing. And it's ultimately it's counterproductive to every other industry, right? Because like I said before, I mean, when you have abundant and economic electricity, it's really cheap to do research and development. Or it's a lot cheaper to do research and development. And what that means is you have a lot more people doing research and development, which means you have a lot more development from that research and development, right? And so you usually get, it's a compounding exponential benefit, not just a linear one, right? It's not just like, oh, well, we have double the energy, we ought to have double the productivity. It's like, no, we have double the energy, we're going to have like 20 times the productivity. And so, and it goes the other way, right? When you cut the energy in half, you get more than a 50% reduction in productivity, right? It's like you drop down to like 10% productivity. And so that's what I see as so dangerous, is this is ultimately a battle of the minds, right? This is a battle for education and understanding of the world around us, the thermodynamic law even, right? I mean, most people don't understand the law of conservation of energy. They don't realize that energy is never created nor destroyed, right? It's just converted. And so, and honestly, like the idea of consuming energy is stupid, because you don't ever really consume it. You just convert it, right? You
just turn it into something else.
Exactly, right? A Snickers bar never loses its caloric value. You consume it, you exert it, you turn it into heat. It maybe dissipates into the air. And so ultimately these, what I would say are, you know, relatively basic, but often misunderstood or completely, you know, not understood concepts around energy. Bitcoin is going to incentivize many more people to learn about these things. And the more people that understand these concepts, the more people understand that the current carbon accounting system is completely flawed. That a unit of carbon dioxide is not a one-to-one unit with environmental destruction. And ultimately that I think our role or our impact comes from how efficiently we strive to use energy, which the last 15 years, all we've been doing is like shutting down nuclear power plants. They shut down some coal fire power plants in Europe, and they turned them into wood fire power plants, or they call them biofuel, biomass, right? Which is net zero carbon. Like literally I posted, I mean, I recommend everybody, if people have made it to this long in the podcast, you have to go watch this documentary. It's called Burned the Movie, right? It's about how in the southeastern part of the United States right now, we are exporting our forests to Europe and we're burning them. Okay. So literally there are companies in the southeastern part of the United States, all within 100 miles of the coast, because they need to get the wood, the timber to port in order to cross the ocean. But they're cutting down forests. They're taking the wood or the timber, they're pelletizing it, right? They make little pellets, wood pellets. So it's a lot of surface area. And then they fill up these freaking cargo ships with these pellets. They barge them over to Europe on diesel fuel, obviously. And they throw them in a freaking coal fire power plant, which is actually a cogen plant, right? You can throw coal or wood or both. But they're mainly throwing wood pellets in there because they've shut down the coal because it's so dirty. And they're getting shitloads of subsidies and net zero benefits in their websites about how they're all green and everything. Meanwhile, the actual emissions from the stack are like 65, 75% more carbon dioxide per megawatt hour burning wood than burning coal. Right? Coal is way cleaner than wood. I mean, wood has also, I mean, there can be nasty shit in timber, right? I mean, trees can have funguses and mold and all this other shit. Coal is pure carbon, right? So like, I mean, yes, there's emissions to coal, but it's a lot cleaner and a lot more energy dense than wood. But beyond that, the only thing we have in this world to take carbon out of the atmosphere and put it into the soil is fucking trees. It's forests. It's our only carbon sink that we have. And they're destroying our carbon sink, and then they're emitting, they're burning it, and then they're claiming they're net zero. And they're getting fucking rich. And by the way, this didn't exist 5 years ago. This industry biomass didn't even exist 5 years ago. And yet it's a booming multi-billion-dollar industry today because of these green policies that governments have passed, the United States included.
That they've probably all been on the inside of.
Oh, of course. I mean, they all own the stocks of these companies, and they're all getting kickbacks and they're getting rich. And so the only thing that can really combat this, in my mind, I mean, I've thought a lot about these things, is either one, a more powerful mafia regime that doesn't buy into this bullshit, which isn't going to happen because
probably not going to happen.
The whole world, I mean, other than China is the other mafia machine that doesn't buy into this, because China opened up like 3 new coal fire plants last year. Nobody else in the world did. China did. So they're going to be kicking everyone's ass with their cheap power. And so like either that, or we need an awakening. We need an awakening of the minds. We need people to wake up to how wrong and flawed this is, how corrupt truly this is. And one of the reasons I love this documentary is because this was like truly a grassroots documentary. Like they have good production value, but you can tell it's low budget. And they're like, these people like got on the ground. They literally got in their car and they followed the trucks. Like they saw the trucks pull into the freaking forest, the lumber yard. They watched them cut the trees, put it on the truck. They follow the truck to the freaking facility where they pelletize it. They follow the pellets to the thing. Like they did some really good investigative, journalism into this. Now, obviously these companies came in, and when they came into these communities, they claimed that they were going to come in and they were going to be a support arm of the timber community, of the timber industry. And what they were going to do is they were only going to take the wood that can't be used for lumber, right? So they were like, because there's a bunch of timber when you cut down a forest and you use lumber, there's a bunch of knotted wood and stuff that you're not going to put into boards to build a house. And so all of that, they claimed that they were just going to take all of that waste wood, and that's what they were going to use to go pelletize and stuff. But no, after watching them, you don't have to watch them for very long. They're clear cutting forests for exactly this purpose, right? And it's absolutely insane, right? And so, like, I've posted on Twitter about this documentary. I mean, it was so eye-opening to watch this. It's so infuriating, and you can tell the people in this documentary are, trust me, they are like the most climate conscious. I would even call them to some degree climate extremists, right? And even they are sitting there going like, we should burn coal instead of doing this.
Why are we doing it?
Well, yeah, one of the beautiful things about coal is it stopped us from destroying forests. Like before we discovered coal fire, we were just decimating forests for electricity, for heat. And then we found coal, and it was like, holy shit, this amazing. It's fucking everywhere. I mean, in Alberta, you can shovel coal off the ground. Like, it's a beautiful, beautiful, really, really energy dense source. It's easy to store. I mean, you can just have a mountain of it outside, and then like whenever you need it, you just shovel it into the fire. Like, it's not like, it's really easy to store. It's not like, solar or wind where you need like crazy batteries that spend so much money and stuff.
And that are filled with like lithium and, cobalt,
nickel, and
all the stuff that's farmed with slave labor and
all the shit that's really difficult to mine and very, very, very scarce relative to other, minerals. And, it's just, it's a matter of just trying to bring reality to the forefront, because the propaganda and the marketing has been so successful the last 3 decades. I feel like, in every movie, everything, like the oil industry is the dirty bad guys, and
Yep.
then like wind turbines and solar panels are like the birds are chirping and like there's rainbows. It's just like
I
it's just
remember
been a mind game.
they've done a really good job of it. I remember there was a Matt Damon, John Krasinski movie that came to Pittsburgh
Yeah,
to
I've seen
shoot,
that one.
and it was like trying to like it was like people were like laughing like what at the end like the movie's gonna end with Matt Damon just like holding a child who turned into a puddle of goo because of natural gas. Like,
Well, what's really funny about that movie was that Matt Damon's the guy that comes in and he's like for the oil and gas lobby.
yeah, yeah,
And what's funny is that Krasinski is like the anti-fossil fuel guy.
yeah.
But what's funny is that Krasinski's actually owned by the oil and gas companies in that movie.
In that movie.
Yes, you figure that out right at the end as you figure out Matt Damon realizes that the guy who's been protesting him is being paid by the oil and gas companies. So because they know they're going to have opposition, they might as well control the opposition.
Yeah. I mean,
right. And so that's how bad they made the oil and gas companies look. They made them look like even the environmentalists are owned by the oil and gas companies. That's literally the message. The movie
I don't even know if I made it that far into the movie to realize.
Oh yeah, dude. No, they made them out to be like the most villainous, deceptive sons of bitches. And by the way, like oil and gas companies, just like many other massive multinational corporations, have done some shady shit. No doubt, right? I mean, I don't think they've been as shady as the banks, or the pharmaceutical companies. But yeah, there's definitely corruption in every industry, right? And so nobody's been Mother Teresa when they get to that size and that scale. But God, I mean, I'd say the last 2-3 decades, all the oil and gas industry has done has been kicked in the teeth, and then
the power goes out and everybody goes, hey, what are you not doing enough for us?
Well, what's fucked up too is that, like, I mean, Steve Barber talks about this, and it wasn't until he started talking about it that I started looking into it and kind of considering these ideas. But one of the things that's so blasphemous is like ExxonMobil, these bigger oil and gas companies, they've completely capitulated on the ESG movement, and they're spending tons of money investing in like solar. Like, why would I ever want to own that stock? Like, you're an oil and gas company, you're investing in an inferior intermittent power generation. Like, you should be spending your money to be a better oil and gas producer, not kowtowing to the government. And it's because BlackRock is really the main driver behind all ESG, right? And they own billions. Everything. I mean, they own trillions of dollars of green companies. And so it's in their best, they love that this bill just passed. What was it? The Senate?
The 740 Inflation Reduction.
700. Yeah. Oh yeah. This is the biggest allocation to climate change in history. It's just so monumentally important.
Oh,
I mean, and of course they're going to say that because they know they're going to get rich. I mean,
yeah. No, that's what I posted on Twitter and said. I was like, this is like the equivalent of like fighting inflation with a $740 billion Inflation Reduction Act is like trying to put out a house fire with a flamethrower.
Yeah.
Like, it's insane. And the fact that money printing has ever been good for the environment is complete BS.
It's money printing is one of the biggest incentivizers of waste, right? I mean, the reason we waste so much in energy production, and it's not just oil and gas. I mean, like hydroelectric, solar and wind waste way more than oil and gas. And it's a product of the money printer, right? If it's a matter of time preference, and that's one of the beautiful things about Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin's going to change the way energy producers produce, electricity and power and energy. It's going to change their time preference, right? Where they're going to have a longer horizon. I've said it with oil and gas producers before, where I think they're going to be much more, much greater stewards of the environment beyond just not letting any natural gas get flared or vented. But they're going to produce their wells a little bit differently because they're going to have a lower time preference. Right? Yeah. They're going to frack differently because they have a lower time preference. Right. Now, I'm not a downbore engineer or a reservoir engineer or anything. So I can't speak too much to the specifics, but from what I understand, it's a matter of, now that they can bring every BTU of energy potential in the basin to market, they're going to produce a little differently.
They're gonna do it. Yeah, they're not.
Yeah, I mean, they're not going to waste. They don't want. I mean, that's what's so beautiful about Bitcoin. Bitcoin rescues waste, and while that sounds awesome and amazing, what Bitcoin really does is it penalizes waste. Right?
Yeah,
If you're flaring gas today, you're missing out on a potential, $7 to $12 an MCF market. And guys are flaring 50,000 cubic feet or 50 MCF a day. You might be missing out on 125 grand a day or 125 grand a year of revenue. Like, I mean, that's 125 grand of revenue per well, right? Per well that you're flaring. Like, what could you be doing with that? Like, would that benefit you? I mean, how many wells do you have that are flaring? Some guys have dozens. Like,
yeah,
we're talking about multi-millions of dollars of potential that now they're waking up to and feeling, holy shit, this is painful to not be selling this. Meanwhile, my competition is making $10 an MCF on their flare gas. And
Hmm.
so this is, without people even interacting with Bitcoin or participating in the network, it changes the way they think about how they're producing energy, right? Without even just by its sheer existence, Bitcoin changes the world.
That's crazy.
Just the optionality. I mean, I think about that with oil and gas producers, like the guys that are negotiating midstream contracts with the pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
Even though they might not even have a Bitcoin mine today, but they get to come to the table, to the pipeline, and they get to say, hey, if you don't give me a good price for my gas, well, I'm just going to mine Bitcoin with my gas and I'm going to get this price. So, right. So it helps producers, whether they're using it or not, just as a bargaining chip. Just that sheer optionality is really, really disruptive.
Yeah. Wow, that's wild. It's such a man. It just blows my mind.
It's an exciting world. It's an exciting time.
It is. It is. Well, I don't want to take up too much of your time because we've been going for a while, but I do want to ask you about the black box because a lot of people are listening. They're getting into home mining. The black box, it reduces what the decibels by about, like, is it half or
no? So this is decibel. Sorry, decibels are decibels are interesting. Like with how you kind of measure it, but so without anything, like if you're just running an ASIC on the table, they're usually around like 75, 85 decibels, right? When they're hot and they're like running at full fan speed, which is about the same as like an alarm, right? Like 85 decibels is loud. It's screaming. In the black box with no additional soundproofing inside of the box or anything, drops it below 60. So it gets down to about 55, maybe even a little bit below 55 decibels. Now, a reduction of 20, 25 decibels is, to the human ear, it's about the equivalent of the sound getting cut in half. Right? A 25 decibel kind of reduction. Like it appears that way. What I like to measure it to is just kind of other common noises, right? So like I measured the air conditioning unit right at my parents' house, and like when it kicks on, when the fan kicks on, and that was at about 75 decibels, right next to it, and my black box was at like 54.
Wow.
With two ASICs in it. So that's a really nice thing. Yeah, I have two ASICs in the one that I was measuring. And so definitely knocks the sound down, right? Now, a lot of it is kind of directional, right? So like the black box, because of where the exhaust is, right, it comes out low on that one side after it's gone through the tortuous path. If you're like standing, in that alley, like the noise is it's like a little bit more intense than literally you just take like a step off to the side and all of a sudden the sound's like gone. It's like it's passing by you, kind of, and so, and like from one side of the box to the side of the box where the exhaust is coming out, like I've measured all that, like it changed a lot, but ultimately the bottom line is within 5 or 7 feet, you're like at 50 decibels or below, which is way more than like your HOA can't get pissed at that. That's the whole idea, is right? Is that if we get this thing as quiet or quieter than an air conditioning unit, then people can't bitch about it because then everyone's got to get rid of their AC. What's really awesome about the black box, what I love about it is one, it kind of proved how robust these new gen ASICs are, right? By not having any supplemental airflow, but the customizability. So there's one, I'll grab these things. So there's one aspect. Yeah, these are cool. So one thing I'm gonna actually do this today. I just got these in the mail. So I got these super powerful, I think what are they called, like neodynamic magnets.
Mm-hmm.
These things are like stupid powerful. Where I mean, maybe I could demonstrate like just sitting here. Like, yeah. So like snap some. So these I'm gonna use on the inside of the box. I'm gonna try to get the sound even lower. So I'm gonna take some, sound foam, sound dampening acoustic foam, and I'm gonna use the magnets. This is one thing that I've been thinking about, and now I'm gonna start tinkering with, is the amount of accessories we could put on this black box. We've got Crypto Cloaks, who's printed a couple of awesome shrouds for like the intake and exhaust and stuff. But because the box is metal, right, and magnets would be great as a means to like affix attachments to the box. And I'm even thinking of like a handle on the top where you don't have to drill any holes or anything. It's just like, you could 3D print a handle, slip a magnet into it, and boom, it just like snaps to the top of the lid. And then, it'd be a nice handle for the top of the lid that doesn't compromise the integrity of the
box.
Lid. And so, yeah, the box, and like, so if rain, that was the reason we didn't put a handle on the top, because if there's any holes through the top, if it rains and water sits on the top of the box, it'll be a matter of time before it seeps through those screw holes or whatever, right? And so, a way to get around that. But so, like, the kind of customizability of the box, right, where you can still reuse the heat. We have customers that have the box in their garage during the winter, and help kind of insulate their house and keep their house warm, and then during the summer they put it outside and just dissipate the heat. But also on like the giving people the ability to test, and giving myself the ability to test different filtrations and things like that. Like, I tested with the black box where I had two What's miners in there, and at about like 95, 96, and they were both in low mode. At about 95, 96 degrees outside, they were getting a little too hot to keep up. And then I pulled the filters off and just put the, kind of the grate, the screen or whatever that holds the filter on the intake and exhaust. I just put those back on, and boom, all of a sudden What's miners could go up to like 105 and be fine. And so like little airflow tests and things to just to be able to understand the ASIC better, and like kind of control an A/B test. I've been loving it for that. But the coolest thing is the fact that I haven't seen or heard my ASICs in months, and they just run. They're just sitting outside. They just run. I just work. They don't go down. I think the last time I logged in, it was like, I think we were at like 29 or 32 days since the machine had gone down, which for me at least, like the machines are always doing a restart or something, or it's getting too hot or something. Before that, it was like I usually had an issue at least once a month. And now I don't expect to go out to the box until I'm going to put the filter back in for winter. So like I'll go back to the box end of September or October and check it out. But like, it just fucking runs, man. It's really nice. And like, because it's so far out in the backyard, like I don't see it. I don't hear it. Well,
you have the camo cloak on it too.
Yeah. Well, I've got 3 of them. I've got 3 black boxes right now. So,
and it's all on your property.
Yeah, it's on the property, and it's like I got it camoed and hidden in the trees, and have it set up to where ideally, like, nothing should happen to it. And we've already had like the gardeners and the lawn care people, like they already know to not fuck with anything, and so like the lawn mowing guy like knows to like not go over the cord and shit. Like,
so you just have a cord running the whole way out there?
I've got it. Well, no. So like the power is actually in the yard. So I've got I've got the panel out there, but I'm running an Ethernet is the issue. Is I'm running an Ethernet. Like I've got like 500 feet of Ethernet because I had no means to. I wanted to use this one particular internet service that we have, so that way it would be isolated, which is really nice. It's not combined with all our other web traffic, so it's like we can go restart the router and we don't have to worry about the miners
kicking the miners off.
Kicking the miners off. I'm actually using satellite internet for the miners, and so the only downside to that is snow in the winter, where we gotta. So like that's the thing. Where like you want $1 million idea, figure out how to prevent snow from building up on satellite dishes. It's a really tough problem to solve.
Have you tried using like non-stick PAM?
Yeah, we did that. It didn't really help. Didn't really work. That's I mean, it's like if you spray it like the day before the storm, you might get lucky, but it's pretty much
Doesn't,
moot.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's an okay, if your like dish is like at a certain position where gravity would really slip things off, but like ours is one where like even if it's slick, like the snow might sit there. And so
Yeah.
one thing I was thinking of was putting a fucking black box next to it. Right. And then the exhaust would melt the snow off the dish, which would then provide internet for this
There you
miner,
go.
which melts the snow off the dish. It becomes kind of this like
Circulating.
this self-containing system. But I mean, and I've actually been looking into how we could do this because it would be really cool.
Is it a Starlink internet or?
No, it's
just
HughesNet.
another. Okay.
It's HughesNet. So like that's EchoStar Dish Network.
Okay.
Yeah, so HughesNet, but a black box on the roof would be pretty cool.
That would be pretty awesome.
That would be pretty sweet. And then, especially if it was melting the snow off the satellite, just by like setting the exhaust to where the exhaust is going to naturally be like flowing into the satellite dish. But we've also got like these bigger black boxes. We released these bigger black boxes recently. They're really awesome because they come with PDUs, right? So then all you got to do is get your electrician to connect the PDU into your panel, and you plug the ASICs in right there in the box. You could have a little ETH switch there, and boom, you could even have an LTE modem on the box and have an antenna, and the box could have its own sovereign internet, right? And so there's a lot of, at the end of the day, like we're building for Bitcoin mines at any scale, right? Down to from 2 ASICs up to 240 of them in a single container. We build everywhere in between. And so, yeah. And then, I mean, having the ability to put ASICs outside is huge. I know a lot of guys that like, it's a game changer.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've told people on the podcast before, but like when I plugged it in, I was like, oh my God, this is so loud.
So loud. And like what I would recommend on the black box is, the pressure barrier aspect. Like I thought you built
the filter at the bottom.
No, the piece that separates the ASIC's exhaust from the intake. So it's like a square hole that you'll set the ASIC through. That piece is of dire importance. And I'd recommend taping it, right? I'd recommend, rather than just having it like sit there, like I'd recommend being diligent and going through with some tape. Now, what's nice about our bigger black boxes is that we custom cut the pressure barrier for you. And it's actually a metal permanently fixed pressure barrier inside the box with backdraft dampers. And it's awesome.
Wow.
Like far superior to the smaller boxes, what is it, like the 2.5 or 3 inch foam barrier that we give you. But for the small box, that barrier's sufficient.
That works,
yeah, I know it's definitely works. Especially if you tape it off, it works great. If you have it just sitting in there over time, the hot air can kind of warp it a little bit and like move it, and then air can kind of make it pass. But if you throw some tape on it, like it'll hold for a long time. It's been great. The bigger boxes are just slightly more like professional, right? They're just slightly more industrial. And so we've got that, we custom cut the barrier for you. And I saw it for the first time in person at the conference in Miami, and it was awesome. Like, but it was so funny is everybody walks up and they're like, so how do you keep the ASICs cool in the black box? And it's like, well, first of all, these things like to run at like 180 degrees. Like they're not cold. But also like they have fans on them. Like so long as it's not 110 degrees outside, like these things can run. They're just a little loud.
Yeah, no, and that's what the black box is, just beautiful. It kind of, simplicity helps with the noise. And like I'm definitely whenever I get mine, I'm gonna keep the ASIC. I know Steve told me, he said it's not really meant for inside.
Only because they move so much fucking air. Like I don't know if I said that to you. I don't know if you've done the math on 500 cubic feet per minute, but that's like 500,000 cubic feet per day.
Which, how many rooms is that? Like,
well, if it's, let's just think about a football field. Let's say a football field is 300 feet by 100 feet. And let's say that there was a roof on the football field that was 10 feet high. So 300 feet by 100 feet, that's right there. That's 30,000. And then 10 feet high. So that's 300,000 cubic feet. So a single ASIC will move a football field with a 10-foot ceiling 1.5 times in a day. That's much air.
Crazy. I mean,
So
it's
it's
funny.
your whole house.
Yeah, that's because what we have, like, where I have it, it's back by the heater, the furnace, and all that stuff. And then I have off of that is the exercise room, um, and then that attaches to the basement. And I have the door from the basement to the exercise room open all the
Mhm.
time so that it's getting airflow. Because anytime, like if we go down, like we have a like movie theater set up in the basement. So if we're watching like movies, like I close it so that the noise isn't
Yeah.
interfering with the movie. But then when I open the door, it's like 1,000 degrees in there,
Yeah. Yeah.
and the door from the basement to the exercise room literally gets sucked open. Like if
Yeah.
you
Oh yeah.
unhinge it, it's like, and
Oh
it's
yeah.
just pinned against the wall. Um, so for the winter time, I think what I'm gonna do is, um, Steve helped me with this because I was gonna cut it in on the after the fans, after the blowers. I was gonna cut it in, but he was like, "You want it before so that you're not fighting
Yeah.
the pressure." Um,
Yeah.
and it actually will work out perfectly. Like our furnace comes down and like the intake comes down. There's a flat part that's honestly, I think, about the size, like the height of the exhaust from the
Hmm.
black box. So I can put just a square, like a
Shroud.
rectangular piece across, connected into the right before the blower. So all that heat will just be going in right where the blower is and go into the system.
Yeah.
And it
So
should.
you'll be sucking air out of that box because that blower will be creating negative pressure, right? Positive
Mhm.
pressure on the outside of the blower and it'll be negative on the intake. And so it'll actually be kind of like sucking air out of the box.
So it'd be like even better,
And
right?
then
It'll be.
yeah, pushing it into your house. Yeah, it'd be great. I mean, like that's what I don't know if you saw Crypto Cloaks. Did you see the shrouds that they released?
Yeah, those pants or whatever the.
Yeah, that for like the exhaust of
Yep.
the black box or the intake. So like that, those would be great. Like the way I look at it is like taking one of those and then you hook up like an 8-inch or a 10-inch duct fan,
Yep.
right? And then you're sucking from the exhaust of the box and push that into like your HVAC system, right?
Mhm.
Before the blower, so that the blower can help push that hot air. Like
Mhm.
you'll have great supplemental heat.
Oh,
Like
like our.
and all you got to do is if it's like cool enough that it's not putting enough heat out, we'll just take like a piece of cardboard and just block off some of the intake and choke the machines. And trust me, they'll get hot.
Yeah.
They'll fucking spool up and create more heat. And like that's all you got to do is you got to mess with the intake. You could just choke off the ASICs till they get hot enough that you want, and then you can give them as much airflow so that they're not
Because there won't
barely
be any
warm
problem
air.
getting the air out. Yeah. So it's
Yeah, exactly.
if you're choking them on the inside intake side, that's not necessarily a problem.
All that's going to mean is that they're getting a little bit less airflow. Like, the system that's
Yeah.
sucking the air is it's getting choked a little bit. And so it'll just increase their temperature. Yeah. It'll decrease the amount of heat that they're dissipating. And so they'll build up more heat on the boards and the air temperature will go up. And so like I've had that, I have this issue when I heat my house during the winter where like I'll open my garage just like this much and the ASIC's fan speed will just boom, just drops because it's sucking in such cold air that the air that's coming out of it is actually like not that warm. And so like I'll shut the garage and like let it build up and get super, super hot and then start filtering that air up into my house. And then I'll crack the garage a little bit and start like feeding cold air into the machine and slow it down. But it'll like, you almost got to let it get warm. I mean, too cold is an issue. It's usually not an issue many people deal with. And it's not really an issue that shuts the ASICs down, but if they go down, they can't start back up if they're too cold. And now that's like below zero though. So like it would need to be real. But Pittsburgh can get pretty freaking cold.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, we're not quite Rocky Mountain cold, but we're still pretty cold.
And it's like that humid cold.
Yeah. Oh, and there's a lot of moisture.
Yeah, it hurts.
But I'm excited to see. And then I just figured out too that like out by our pool on the opposite side of our pool and on the near side too, but like I found 220 outlets. I just was looking at them. I was like, oh,
dude, that's everything.
I was like, that's
everything, man. That's
I was like, because I had to get the electrician to I paid the electrician like $400 to come put one in my basement. in
Oh
the
shit, yeah.
because I didn't have one. I was like, I'm
Yeah.
not getting into the panel. Like I'm
No,
not
no, no.
messing
You
with that.
no, no. You're not. If you're not a certified electrician, don't go fuck anywhere near
No.
the panel, man.
But
Like, just don't even.
I was like, well, now I have the perfect scenario once I get the black box. Summertime. I was telling Steve, I don't think the heat is really causing a problem in our house. Like our AC isn't running extra, but you know, if you can take the heat out of the house in the summertime, then it can't hurt.
No, no,
So
and it'd be better for sound and stuff too. Like just putting it in the backyard. I mean,
yeah,
I always recommend to guys though. Like, I don't know why they wouldn't buy a $10 tarp and throw it over the thing. Like,
yeah,
at
yeah.
least so that the intake and the exhaust aren't covered. Just like kind of wrap it around the box. Maybe even like tuck it underneath the bottom of the box so that the tarp won't blow away or anything.
Well,
Right?
and I can put it next
Bungee
to the
it.
pool filter, honestly, and like next to the pool filter, it's gonna be like, you know, like it'll be way quieter than the
Oh
pool
yeah.
filter, and it won't
If
like
anything, it'll be like it'll be kind of just another you know
like I
kind of
definitely won't
static
notice it.
noise.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it won't be an issue. I'll say this, like even I have a black box. I didn't realize this until like a week ago, but where I have it set, there's a sprinkler that like sprays my black box. Like
And it's
as it
fine.
like, oh, it's totally fine. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
totally fine. I mean, I've got a tarp over it. We've had a couple of customers that they had a little bit of water seep through the top seal. Now it didn't
Uh-huh.
like go into the box. It was just like on the rim.
Mm,
And it just looked like the seal got like sweaty. And so like if you
mm.
pressed that gasket, like some water would kind of bleed out. And so now that's just a matter of like one, it might have just gotten so hot that the glue of that gasket like got a little loose, and then there was
Yeah.
a little place where like water could barely seep in. Good news is like even if it flooded in, like where the ASIC sits in the box,
It's still fine.
like the water, it would have to be at there's like two very narrow spots where if water came in there, it might go down to the platform where the ASIC's sitting, but the rest of it is all going to just go below the ASIC, right? I mean, like the box could
Probably
flood.
it have to be like biblical floods.
It would have to be really, really torrential floods. But then like mine, I threw a tarp over it, really, I mean, like just haphazardly in a way and wrapped it with some bungee cords. And like every time I take the tarp off, I mean, there's like dust and pollen and stuff under there, but I haven't seen anything
Yeah.
of moisture. And like I said, I'm literally spraying the damn thing with with a freaking sprinkler, like probably like twice a week. And so,
Yeah.
I'm at least putting it to an honest test.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Giving it an honest go.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, dude, Adam, I appreciate it. There's so much more I could get into, but we'll have to save that maybe for another time here to do an update
We'll
on
do it again.
yeah. But yeah, tell people where they can check out the black box and all that and find you.
Yeah, I'd say, well, first of all, check out Upstream Data. We're at upstreamdata.ca. We're a Canadian company. And check us out on Twitter, Upstream Data Inc. I'm Denver Bitcoin on Twitter. I'd say really, take a look at that. And then if you're interested in the black box and stuff, from that website, upstreamdata.ca, you should be able to find our web store. We have an online shop where you can, look at our different products and purchase
Get
things.
ASICs too.
Yeah, exactly. Get ASICs too. If you're looking to buy a black box, and if you need ASICs, like bundling them together, we give you a nice discount, like probably about 5-6%. And so, if that's attractive, let us know. Otherwise, feel free to reach out to me. Like I said, Denver Bitcoin on Twitter, and you can shoot me a message if you're interested in these things. I'd be happy to talk with you.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. Hopefully we'll do this again soon, and look forward to whenever you release this episode.
Yeah. Thanks again to Adam for coming on, and thanks again to our sponsor, the BitBox O2 hardware wallet. I will talk to you guys next week.